When we typically think about the approach of trade unions towards aspects of pay and reward, probably the thing that is most obvious and comes immediately to mind is about their orientation to the level of reward, and that what unions really want in relation to pay is more. And the statement that Gompers is famously associated with, that when asked what unions' priorities in pay are, they are more, always more. And it's true, the thing that most characterises pay in unionised settings compared to pay in non-unionised settings is the existence of what's known as the union wage gap, a premium that organisations end up paying because of the increased strength that's provided to employees in wage bargaining, that it strengthened their side of the labour market. And so they extract a higher cost for their labour. This union wage gap is often very difficult to define. You see all kinds of figures bandied around. It's thought to be around about 8%, though not as great as it used to be. It's different in some parts of the labour market than in others. So, for example, it's quite strong amongst male manual workers, areas where unions have traditionally been very well organised and where those employees otherwise would be quite weak, in a quite weak position, and so they're able to offer a fair amount of protection, but much less so amongst male non-manual workers. So in areas where they typically can rely more on their innate market skills, it has the existence or otherwise of unions has a much smaller effect. Might be less, around about 1/10% in those kind of areas compared to about 9% amongst male manual workers. Has a big effect amongst female full-time employees, as much as 15-16%. The effect of the union wage gap amongst that group, a little bit less, around about 8% for female part-time employees. So union wage priorities, union wage pay priorities are about level often. It's about the wage gap. Now, of course, in practice, it's not simply a question of unions maximising the bargaining position of employees. It's much more complex than that. So as Ed Heary has discussed, unions very rarely push their advantage as far as they possibly can, whatever advantage that might be, because of the potential impact that might have in other areas. So if unions were to push as far and as hard as they possibly could on the basis of their organising strength, that may well have detrimental impact on levels of employment and social welfare and those kinds of issues. And so there's a trade-off. It's a compromise. It's a bargain that unions engage in a more sophisticated way. So yes, unions want more. Of course they do. They want more for their members. But they don't mindlessly push to more at the expense of other important elements, most notably levels of employment, as Heary, Freeman and others have identified. Beyond simply providing the existence of a wage premium, unions have an orientation towards the distribution of rewards as well. Now, because of the existence of the union wage premium, i.e. that it exists for some organisations that are unionised but not in other organisations where they're not unionised, one of the effects of unions on pay across an economy can be to widen pay inequality between organisations, that where unions exist they tend to be higher and where unions don't they tend to be lower, so it tends to stretch pay a little bit across the economy. But it can also have another effect because unions have an orientation towards equality. They have a philosophical identification with equality. And so whilst between union and non-unionised organisations pay inequality might stretch, within unionised organisations, we tend to see more of a compression of pay structures. So there'll be smaller gaps between those at the bottom and those at the top, because unions, who may typically organise lower paid members in quite a large degree, will often focus their attention at that end and seek to raise the floor of wages within a particular organisation, so compress the pay structure, have a more egalitarian pay structure in line with their broad philosophical predilections, and also as part of a function of union strategy to remove managerial discretion over pay to jobs in the same category. They want every job, every job holder to have the same level of pay as a holder of the same job. So if you do job A, this is your pay. If you do job B, this is your pay, and that tends to limit the spread of reward within an organisation. Now, I've talked about this philosophical approach that unions have, that they are rooted in a moral position which sees greater equality as a good thing and inequality as a broadly bad thing. And this morality in rewards tends to influence their broad approach towards it. So we tend to see an emphasis on fair distribution of rewards, that rewards should be provided on the basis of contribution, that there's greater equality, that there's a rate for the job and a common range of benefits. They tend to resist, they tend not to be comfortable with rewards which are fragmented, that are only available in some circumstances to some people and not others. They're a common approach based on this moral agenda of equality. They have also been associated with attempting to advance and uphold the rights of women workers over the last 20 or 30 years at least. And given the way in which women workers tend to be concentrated at the lower end of labour markets historically, that in turn tends to result in a greater compression of the pay structure. As unions are more successful in advancing their rights, advancing their position in per market, that tends to bring up the floor and compress pay structures more so. And that association with the rights of women workers is also extended to atypical groups of employees, disabled people in the labour market, and different demographic groups. And again, it has the same effect. These people who've been historically disadvantaged, who tend to end up at the lower end of the labour markets, that unions act as their champion and to push up their position within pay structures. Now, obviously, unions' ability to do any of these things, to compress pay structure, to achieve a wage premium and so on, all of those things are dependent upon level of union strength, level of membership, product market conditions, and because each of those conditions have been deteriorating for some time. Union membership has been deteriorating broadly for some decades now, and product market conditions are currently quite weak. That as a result of that, we tend to see movement in labour markets going in the opposite direction, with increasing levels of inequality rather than equality over that period of time. Now, we've been focusing on effectively cash pay here, but there are other elements of rewards that unions have an interest in as well. There is a common assumption that unions are just about pay, but there is a much greater association, much greater interest in rewards amongst unions than that. We see when we look at the rewards of unionised workers compared to non-union workers, that unionised workers are much more likely to receive sick pay, a pension, subsidised meals, paid holidays. So that quite a broad interest in and pursuit of a wide range of rewards, particularly in those areas of deferred rewards, the kinds of rewards that we associate with security, like sickness benefits, maternity pay, pensions, those kinds of things have been very high on union agendas. We've mentioned that rewards remain an important source of conflict at work, an important source of conflict within the employment relationship. Specifically, the areas of reward that tend to result in those kinds of conflict are around issues like the particular terms of the wage effort bargain, that either people are being expected to work harder for no more money, or that the pay increases don't reflect the increases in effort that employees are being expected to undertake. So it's that equity, that trade-off, the calculation that people make, all of those equity judgments that we've talked about from time to time, the terms of the wage effort bargain, which are often seen as trigger points in terms of conflict and where unions take action in pursuit of those issues. Other areas of that are causes of conflict are the relationship of pay to the cost of living. So if pay fails to keep track with inflation, as we're seeing at the moment, particularly in the UK, in public sector institutions, with pay restrictions, raise restrictions at the time where inflation continues to increase and people's living standards drops below what it has historically, that becomes a source of build-up of tension and a source of conflict in the employment relationship. More broadly, where pay doesn't match expectations in terms of living standards, where pay doesn't reflect increases in efficiency or in the profitability of the organisation, that fairness in the distribution of organisational goods is not seen as being right or appropriate, and that may be a source of conflict. Where pay may be seen as unfair relative to others. So if an organisation in a particular industry is holding pay back, where pay in similar organisation marches on, then that may be a flashpoint for conflict. And the final area that we see causes of conflict around pay are in the method of payment. So particularly as we've seen innovations towards more individualised schemes like performance-related pay, merit pay, profit sharing, and those kinds of things, we've seen some friction around changes because of the individualisation of those elements. Now, this area in particular is an area it's been a historical concern for unions. We've talked about how unions and collectivism are natural bedfellows. They imply one another. So the development of individual pay schemes like PRP or merit pay schemes, these are seen as representing a very sharp break in traditional arrangements, a very sharp break in traditional industrial relations assumptions, as Ed Heary puts it. And they're seen as a threat. They're seen as a threat to the security and stability of employees' earnings, because all of a sudden there's this element of pay which is at risk. It might be given, it might not. It's something that you can't always predict, that there are perverse effects, that there are greater control of these kinds of rewards in the hands of individual managers, which may be distributed unfairly without proper checks and balances, without systems, the rules and policies and structures and practices that unions like to, in order to restrict the freedom of managers to manage as they please. They're seen as potentially divisive, that they set one employee against the other and they threaten that cohesive unity, that collectivism upon which effective unionism rests. They're seen as a threat because of their potential to widen pay inequality, that no longer would people who do the same job be receiving the same pay, but somebody who does this job and is regarded as being a high performer will be paid up here, and somebody a low performer will be paid down there. It divides the workforce and increases greater inequality into reward schemes. And because it's resting on an individual relationship between employee and manager, that managers are managing the workforce individually, assessing their performance, and then reinforcing that through their ability to provide a reward, it threatens the role of the unions as the collective representative of the workforce, as the bargaining agent, because there's now this part of pay which isn't part of their gift. They can no longer bargain over this. This is something that is managers' sole preserve. So many reasons for unions to resist. Now, despite that, when we look at the role of unions in the development of new reward practices, it's not all negative. It's not all about resistance. And we've seen in some of the work of Eaton and Voos, who've identified a range of positive impacts on workplace innovations, including reward innovations, that unions have when they engage with them. Now, one of those advantages is that where innovations take place, that they tend to be deeper, that they have a greater impact upon productivity and profitability, where there is buy-in from the union side. So that credibility that unions lend to these innovations that aren't simply being seen as being imposed by management, that alters the qualitative impact of those innovations in themselves. They also, these innovations where unions engage also tend to have much greater potential for integration with other personnel practices within workplaces, that they can spread more widely, they become part and parcel of the way in which they take root in the organisation. Union engagement with these practices, in turn, can provide unions themselves with a foothold for greater institutional centrality, that where they can act as an effective, positive, collective voice, thinking about Freeman and Meadows' voice mechanism, that where unions can take on that role, that their ability to do this in relation to new reward practices embeds their position, strengthens their institutional role within organisations. Now, the circumstances in which unions are prepared to accept reward change, some of them we've already talked about. So the trade-offs that we see, where unions are loath to risk levels of employment in order to push for pay increases. And similarly, where unions acknowledge extreme competitive threats to an organisation, they will moderate their positions. That the key element in the quid pro quo for unions is always about job security. So unions can be relied upon to make all kinds of compromises in relation to reward in order to secure job security. That is their key bottom line. They also have a propensity to engage with these kinds of innovations where management offer them with an opportunity to jointly regulate the scheme. So there's much greater acceptance of, say, performance-related pay schemes, where unions were able to have a say in the design and in the monitoring of the processes. So if they could be satisfied about the fairness, about the way in which rewards would be distributed and so on, then their engagement with the process was likely to be much higher. Where unions were able to satisfy themselves that that employees would not be subject to too great a transfer of risk in pay elements, then that often provided a means to greater engagement with reward innovations. So we see a complex picture around the kinds of approaches that that unions engage in relation to rewards. It's not simply about more, it's about a much broader range of issues.